Episode 6 of The Last of Us has finally aired, and you know what that means? Well, okay, when I'm writing this, episode 5 isn't even out yet, but hopefully, when I release this, episode 6 will be out. You know what I mean. Last of Us review series, Act 2 time. And yes, I am calling this Act 2. I was actually gonna call the first video Act 1, but I thought that sounded too, well, film critic elitist of me. Honestly though, the more I thought about it, the first 3 episodes of the show were Act 1 of the story. More specifically, Act 1 of Joel's hero's journey, which is ironic because Joel is not a hero. We'll get into that later. Now, this has been talked about plenty of times before. There's actually a really great Reddit post going through each step of the hero's journey, but I think the show actually follows this structure even better than the game did. That doesn't necessarily mean it is better though, although the more the show goes on, the more I'm starting to think that. I actually think you could pinpoint some of the stages of the hero's journey to specific characters and their stories. The ordinary world is the QZ. If you want a character to represent that, I guess you can say it's Robert. The call to adventure is obviously Marlene. The refusal of the call is expressed through Tess urging Joel to do this job, even in the end only caring about keeping Ellie safe, not even taking her to the Fireflies. Then the mentor would obviously be Bill, with his letter being the assistance Joel needs to finally depart on a spiritual journey to love again. So going into episode 4 of this show, we can expect Joel to go through the trials next, or test allies and enemies, or whatever you want to call it. There's multiple versions of the hero's journey. I'm just thinking of calling it trials to keep it simple. As of writing this, episode 5 and 6 are not out yet. However, from what the episode titles suggest, Act 2 is going to end with the Abyss, Death and Rebirth, which, yeah, you could definitely say that again. And honestly, I am so excited for that moment to come. But first, let's finally start this review and talk about episode 4, Please Hold My Hand. By the way, I love whenever shows name their episodes after songs, like this one. The last episode was called Long Long Time, and episode 2 was called Infected, which is the name of a song from The Last of Us OST. Okay, sorry. I'll stop stalling now. We'll get to the actual review.
Why are all these pages stuck together?
What the fuck?
The pun book. I mean, what else do you want me to say? We can honestly end it here. The pun book. It's all I need to talk about. Okay, fine. I'll talk about the episode. Honestly though, while there is a lot to talk about with this episode, it is a very short one. Possibly the shortest of the show. Although it looks like episode 9 might be even shorter. First off though, let's talk about probably my least favorite part of this episode, Kathleen. Not that she is a bad character. In fact, I am really interested in seeing what they do with her in the next episode. But there is my problem. While yes, her group is the one that are chasing Ellie and Joel, I feel like I've yet to see where fleshing out this group of antagonists benefits the story. I think where she is going to benefit the story is to flesh out the backstory of Henry and Sam, which we will hopefully start seeing in the next episode. In this episode, however, while I do understand why she is here, I feel like she just takes us away from the main plot, that being Joel and Ellie finally bonding. Speaking of which, let's talk about what this episode is mostly about. Ellie and Joel finally bonding. Something we have all waited to see since the start of the show. Pun book. Pun book. Pun book. Okay, I'll hold off on talking about the pun book for now. There is something about it though that is going to blow your mind later. Trust me, we'll get back to it. Let's focus on Ellie in this episode and then touch on Joel as we did in the last episode. Bella Ramsey is so adorable and I love them so much. And listen, if after this episode you still don't like this Ellie, what are you on? Look, I love Ashley Johnson, but Bella is also killing it. Okay, let's take this in order. Ellie playing with the gun in the mirror like a toy reminds us of the gun, tells us she knows more than we thought about it, and shows us that she has childlike view on violence. Her reading the puns to Joel, which I will get to later. The special magazine joke taken right out of the game. It makes me so happy. Ellie and Joel camping where she shows genuine fear. Then you have Ellie shooting the guy, which... Okay, yeah, we should probably talk about this moment a bit more. This show has a great focus on making everything feel grounded and realistic. Or at least as realistic as you can be. And that extends to the deaths, including this one. It feels quite similar to what Naughty Dog did with the combat in part 1, and especially in part 2. Playing a video game and seeing this stuff though, it can be easy to ignore. You're not thinking about the people you kill, you're thinking about getting to the next objective. You're trying to figure out what is the best way to tackle this obstacle and get to the next area. In a show, however, they have the freedom to put this right in front of your face. And I know I've been calling quite a few scenes haunting so far, but this one made me feel absolutely disgusted watching it. I dreaded rewatching it, and knowing me, editing this part is going to be a struggle. It is, but not because of the scene, but because I'm sick and my throat hurts and I feel like dying. Yeah, this is a struggle to edit, but you know, not for those reasons. And just in case it isn't said, major props to, I need to figure out how to pronounce that name. I should have done this sooner. Hold on. Okay, I did research. I couldn't find a single interview with the dude, so I'm gonna try Juan Magana. I probably completely butchered that name, and I am so sorry. He's the guy that plays Brian, and this is so embarrassing that I can't pronounce your name. So I'm just gonna say, if you're watching this video, I am deeply sorry, and you did a great job. I'm trying to say you did a great job, but I can't pronounce your name. I'm ruining the moment. Let's move on. This moment made me feel absolutely sick, just like Ellie does immediately afterwards. And if I had to pick one scene that perfectly captures why I love this show so freaking much, it's this scene of Ellie. I've mentioned before how a lot of the performances of this show are subtle, and this moment in particular shows that off the best. I absolutely love when stories leave a lot to the audience's interpretation. Ellie's reaction to shoot Brian absolutely does this. I love how we don't actually see Brian get shot, but instead just her face. Then when she gets behind the wall, we see her crying, but immediately she wipes it off and tells Joel she is fine. When I first watched it, I had a pretty straightforward interpretation. She felt regret over shooting this man, but doesn't want to show that emotion to Joel. This is backed up by the next scene of her crying, which she does after Joel himself is the most open he has been to her so far. If you played part 1, however, you might interpret this scene a bit differently. In the game version of this scene, first off, the death is less traumatic, but more importantly, Ellie, while she does say she feels sick about killing this man, brushes off quickly and berates Joel for not comforting her after what she did. It's a great moment, and you do get that feeling watching this scene in the show, especially with how angry Joel looks at her after she shoots Brian. Both Joel being mad and Ellie crying have little to no dialogue, unlike the game version. And honestly, we need a counter for me saying this at this point. The show is more subtle, which works better for the medium. So you could see this moment as her crying that Joel didn't comfort her, instead of her regretting her actions. If you listen to Behind the Scenes podcast, however, which you absolutely should, by the way, I've been referencing it like 3 times so far, the way Craig Mazin described this moment, I'll even play a quote from it exactly.
And her thought process is, I feel sad for him, so I must be weak.
She's crying not because of what she did, but because of how she feels. She thinks she's weak for feeling regret over what she did. I acknowledge I am ruining the magic of the scene by explaining it and showing off all these different interpretations of this moment, but I feel like this moment is a great example of why I love this show so much. None of these interpretations are wrong. In fact, I think Ellie is feeling a mix of all these emotions. Bella Ramsey does such an incredible job during the scene to show off all these different emotions, and they deserve all the praises they can get. Like Joel says later, Ellie is still a child, and she shouldn't have to kill at such a young age. She had this rose-tinted view on violence, thinking it was going to be easy, and admired Joel for protecting her in episode 1, but she quickly realized that killing can be brutal, and that it's not easy to do. Even Joel still struggles with it. But wait a second. Ellie also says something after Joel's heartfelt apology that recontextualizes a lot of what just happened.
It wasn't my first time.
I don't want to talk about it. Okay, that was a lot. But we're not even done yet. We still got a lot to talk about. We still gotta talk about Joel and the pun book! This item single-handedly bonded Ellie and Joel and deserves the MVP role of the season. This book has a big role in the game, helping the player to bond with Ellie during downtime, and in the show, it might have an even bigger role.
The book just fell on my head. I only have myself to blame. Or wait, I said it wrong. Hold on, let me read it again. A book just fell on my head. I only have my shelf to blame. I ruined it.
And look, I know it's obvious they are bonding over this book, but trust me, there is more to this than you might realize. First off, let's go back to Ellie for a moment. She tells jokes from this book a total of 3 times in the episode, and they are not without purpose. The first time, I will give her the benefit of the doubt. She did it because she was bored, and it also introduces the audience to the book. The second and third times are when she and Joel are going to sleep, and both times, she does it to try and avoid either fear or trauma. In the second scene, she reads the scarecrow joke while questioning if she and Joel are truly safe out in the forest. Her last line in the scene, though, is still her questioning if they are safe. In the third scene of this episode, she doesn't want to think about the first time she hurt someone.
Me neither.
This time, though, she ends the scene telling a joke and being happy that she finally made Joel laugh. She was finally able to push past Joel's barriers and make him smile for the first time in possibly 20 years. Now, let's talk about Joel's side of these jokes. There is one detail about the first joke scene that I really wish I caught on my first viewing, but luckily Tyler Howarth on Twitter was the one to point this out. You can hear the main theme of the game playing when Ellie tells one of her jokes. One that Joel seems to have quite a negative reaction to, shaking his head no and telling Ellie to go back into the truck. What was that joke about again?
What did the mermaid wear to her math class? An algebra.
Algebra? Well, that's funny. When was the other time in the show math was mentioned?
You get your homework done? Fractions?
Now, could this be a coincidence? Possibly. But considering we had a reference to the pancake mix Joel and Sarah ran out of in the last episode...
Where's the pancake mix?
There were certain brands of food that were sold everywhere, all across the country, across the world. Bread, cereal, pancake mix.
I wouldn't be surprised if this was another intentional reference to the first episode. Even if it wasn't, Joel's reaction still shows that these jokes remind him of Sarah, something he doesn't want to think about. Okay, so what about the second scene? Well, in this scene, Ellie tells a setup to the scarecrow joke, but Joel says the punchline. I think it's funny how realistic it is that Ellie hasn't heard this joke before, considering where and how she was raised, despite it being a fairly common pun. Anyway, in this moment, Joel turns away from Ellie. Yes, to sleep, but also to hide away his smile. Maybe him saying the punchline before Ellie was his way of shutting down the joke more nicely. But more importantly, after this moment, and after Ellie voices her concerns about safety, Joel decides to stay up and watch over the area, and protect Ellie. I'm sure he decided to do this after he was sure Ellie was asleep as well, trying to hide his emotions again from her, and to protect her from the dangerous realities of the world. Finally, we have the last pun scene, the big one. This one makes Joel laugh. Not quietly like before though, uncontrollably. Ellie defeated him with this joke. She was able to make him feel this moment of joy. It's such a beautiful moment, and I'm not ashamed to admit it, I almost cried watching this. I've been waiting so long to finally see these two bond, and seeing this happen just made me so unbelievably happy. Throughout this episode, we see Joel become a father again. It even started at the end of the last episode with a seatbelt moment. What's more father-like than a long car trip? A long car trip with black coffee. Which, by the way, this show implies that Starbucks survives the apocalypse at least for a couple years. And as someone who has a addiction to Starbucks, I have no idea how to feel about that. Anyway, Joel is becoming a father again. And I absolutely love how the way Ellie is making Joel fall back into this role again is through terrible puns. Some of you might even call dad jokes. I told you the pun book was essential. Okay, I'm joking around here a bit, but seriously, seeing Joel become a father again is so wonderful. It makes me so happy. It's actually around here in the game during my first playthrough I started to really love it. The scene of Joel genuinely apologizing to Ellie for causing her to shoot Brian is such an honest and real moment. And then him teaching Ellie how to hold a gun properly, and the laugh she has is just so wholesome. Although, he is teaching her how to shoot a gun, which, yeah. Who cares? Cute scene. This is the shortest episode so far, yet I feel like I had the most to talk about here. And in truth, I think this is because this is The Last of Us. This is why I love the original game, and why so many others love it as well. This bond between Ellie and Joel is what stole so many people's hearts, including mine. I've been waiting a long time to talk about these two, and now that I am so freaking happy. There are two other characters from this game as well that stole my heart. Two that helped me to love the game even more, whose storyline left me broken and made me finally realize that this game was more than just a game. Let's finally talk about episode 5, Endure and Survive.
Hey,
What's going on?
Nothing.
I'm gonna be honest with you all. I really don't want to talk about Sam and Henry. Even on a second viewing of this episode, even knowing what happens, it hurt. But I gotta. This is gonna be the hardest episode for me to talk about for a variety of reasons. And before we get into this episode, and before I see the comments about it, I am purposely leaving some details and topics out of this review. I feel like even vaguely hinting at certain things that possibly foreshadow future events would reveal future plot points of the series. I am without a doubt going to return to this episode in the future. I think a lot of people who know the story of The Last of Us have already picked up on the scenes I am referring to. So all I'm gonna say is, if you know, you know. If you don't know, maybe it's for the best. Before we talk about Henry, Sam, and my heart breaking into a million pieces, let's follow up on a character from the previous episode I only quickly mentioned, Kathleen. I said in the last episode that she was a character I was interested in seeing play into the plot, but that I wasn't sold on her just yet. After this episode, holy shit! Now, I do understand why some people don't like her. She is basically, if your kindergarten teacher became a terrorist, which some people might find annoying. I was kinda at the start, but she definitely grew on me this episode. The scene that really sold me though, was when she talked about her brother, Michael. This does not justify what she does and tries to do to Sam and Henry, but just like with most of the characters in this show, we don't agree with her actions, but we understand why she does them. And I think what makes her motivations even more interesting is that Henry, someone who's trying to protect his little brother by giving them medicine, took away the brother that protected Kathleen, a brother that taught his sister to forgive, something she refuses to do, resorting to violent vengeance, which eventually leads to her meeting a violent end. Fittingly, by the hands of a child clicker, one that is creepy as all hell, by the way. I think what makes her death funny is that she dies both by a child, something she tried to get rid of earlier by killing Sam and Ellie, and by a clicker, a problem she ignored dealing with to try and get vengeance. Safe to say, I really underestimated how Kathleen was going to play into the plot and themes of this show, and I really gotta give props to the writers and the brilliant performance of Melanie Lynskey. Sorry for ever doubting you. You know, maybe it is a bad idea to judge a story over preconceived notions and only knowing parts of it and not having a full picture of what the story is even trying to say. You know, just saying. You know what, while we're at it, let's discuss the action set piece in this episode. And what a set piece it was, oh my god. I said during my episode 2 review that I didn't expect the show to focus much on action. And honestly, I think I might need to retract that statement. Yes, the show isn't about the action, and so far most of the action only feels like setup for an emotional scene before or after, but damn, have the action beats hit hard so far. Just last episode, we had the Raiders trap being very tense and leading to my favorite scene out of that episode. This set piece, however, honestly feels like it was taken right out of Lord of the Rings with how epic it was. Funnily enough, that was actually the intention. Hell, first time I watched it, I made a joke referencing the Mines of Moria with all the clickers flooding out of the hole, only for me later to listen to the podcast, and that scene literally be referenced by name by Craig Mazin.
There was a moment in the Fellowship of the Ring. The Fellowship is in the Mines of Moria, and seemingly thousands of, I think they're goblins, I don't think they're orcs at that point, I think they're goblins. Anyway, come like skittering down these massive columns like spiders.
And would you look at that? Weta FX worked on both. Ain't that funny? And Weta, well, Weta is talented as hell. When studios don't crunch their FX department. Disney. This was a scene that was built up to in the last episode, and one we knew was going to happen, just not when. Going into this episode, you expect to see clickers underground when the four go there, and the longer you spend there, the more and more expectation builds. Then we get to the sniper section, one taken from the game I will add, and one that is honestly quite heartbreaking. Then Kathleen and her group arrive, tension continues to build more and more, explosions happen, an emotional confrontation between Henry and Kathleen occur, but then it all comes crashing down, and all hell breaks loose. I was actually yelling at the screen multiple times during this. Even though I knew Ellie was going to survive, the tension was through the roof. The mix of practical and CGI here, most of the time being hard to distinguish, is impressive as all hell. Shooting this over multiple nights must have taken a lot of work to do, and it definitely shows. The effort is on display, and is clear to see. The actors they got for the clickers did an incredible job and looked creepy, but the highlight of the scene was without a doubt the bloater. Honestly, part of me wasn't even expecting to see this in the show. I thought it was going to be too much like a video game boss for them to include, and knowing that it was going to be here, I thought it was going to be too unrealistic. I really need to stop worrying about the show. It just continues to impress me. And honestly, what a great time to reveal one. In the game, Joel first encounters a bloater when he is with Bill, and obviously, that wouldn't have worked with the show story, so instead, they decided to include it here. Not only does this make the fight scene even more epic, but seeing this beast tear off the head of Perry, feels like a real emotional punch to Kathleen, especially considering he was the one to tell her to deal with this threat in the last episode. Honestly, every single person who worked on this set piece deserves so much praise. What an incredible battle, and one I honestly expect not to be topped. To be fair, I also thought episode 3 wouldn't be topped as the best episode. And then this episode came out, and now it's very hard for me to decide. Although the more this episode has sit with me, I think this one might be better. I'm sorry, Bill and Frank, but... Okay. I don't think I have anything else to talk about. I mean, I could talk about the reference to Ish in his story, which is really cool to see. However, I honestly don't remember Ish, and I don't really feel like looking up who he is, so yeah. I could also talk about the in-universe metacomic Savage Starlight, which I am really glad to see included in the show. Hell, Endure and Survive is the title of this episode. However, that would honestly just be stalling. I think it's time I finally talk about Sam and Henry. This might be surprising for some of you to hear, but the first time I played through The Last of Us, I actually didn't like it that much. The opening did hook me, but I really didn't like the cast of characters. I thought they were all just a bunch of jerks, and I didn't understand why everyone loved them. As the game went on, however, and Ellie and Joel started to bond more, I too started to bond with the two. Then we got to Sam and Henry, and I quickly started to like them as well. I love the sequences where the party has to split, and I had time to bond with them individually. I started to love this game and started to see why so many people love it as well. Then... it happened. From the moment Sam asked Ellie what it was like to be infected, I knew. Then morning hit, and you know what happens. I vividly remember my first time seeing the scene. I vividly remember seeing that bite mark and dreading what would happen next. Somehow though, it was even worse than I could have imagined. So much worse. Right after that scene, and I went back into gameplay, I sat there, unmoving, not speaking a word for a long time, until Ellie in the game told me to keep going, and I did. I've forgotten quite a few things from The Last of Us, entire characters even, but this moment might be the one that has stuck with me the most, and one I dread watching in the show. But maybe this time it would be different, just like it was with Bill and Frank. Maybe they'll have a better ending than in the game. I had some hope in me, even if it was small. That hope, though, would only lead me to more heartbreak, as this show might have made this moment even worse than in the game, despite us spending less time with the characters. And I think it's this episode, this moment, that finally made me admit that this show, this incredible adaptation of an already incredible work of art, might be even better than its source material. I won't truly be able to decide until I replay part 1 when it releases on PC, but even if I decide to retract this statement later, there is no denying that this show is one in a million. Not just an incredible video game adaptation, but one of the best adaptations in general. Here's why that is. Sam and Henry are parallels to Ellie and Joel. They are definitely much more similar in the game, but the show's Sam and Henry are just as good, if not better. Henry, like Joel, is a protector, ready to do anything to save the one person left in his life, even willing to, while indirectly, kill another. The person he's protecting is Sam, who in the show is both younger and deaf, unlike the game. In the game, he is quite similar to Ellie, and the two are quick to bond. In the show, however, this relationship changes. Changes to something I did not see coming. Sam quickly becomes almost like a little brother to Ellie, who then becomes a protector of him. We'll come back to that in a bit. Right now, let's focus on Henry. Henry is obviously a lot younger than Joel, and I think that leads to a very interesting dynamic between the two. Pretty different than in the game. Henry is a bit inexperienced, and Joel needs to mentor him a bit in order to endure and survive, funnily enough. In return, however, Henry mentors Joel in a different way. Henry makes Joel open up more. I love how Joel is immediately able to understand Henry's situation as soon as they meet and he sees he has a child. He is reluctant to work with him initially, but eventually he does, and they head into Ish's hideout. It's here we, for one, really start to see Sam and Ellie become siblings, but also see Joel apologizing for being rude to him earlier. While what Henry did was bad, Joel is able to understand why he became a collaborator. I love how we didn't get an answer from Joel if he thinks Henry is a bad guy. And honestly, I don't know if he would have said he was or wasn't. Okay, it's like 1 a.m. when I'm editing this, and I just noticed something on rewatch. Right after Henry says Joel should think that he's the bad guy, you can see that Joel is about to shake his head. He does very slightly. So he doesn't think that Henry is the bad guy for trying to do whatever he can to protect Sam. That's all I'm gonna say about this, yeah. The thing that makes Joel end this conversation is when he is reminded of Sarah by Henry. Again, him not wanting to remember that past trauma. Eventually though, he does open up to him. Maybe not as much as Ellie, but he does take her idea and ask Henry if he wanted to travel with them. In the last episode, Joel talked about how the one thing that keeps him going in this hopeless world is family. And while I don't think he sees Henry and Sam as part of his family yet, I do believe if things had turned out differently, he would have one day. Hell, family is the reason why they bonded in the first place. Despite the admittedly little time we spend with Sam and Henry, even in just their first scene together, I love their dynamic. I had to pause multiple times during the scene of the two in the attic to try and mentally prepare myself for the ending of this episode I knew was going to happen. To say that Kevon Woodard and Lamar Johnson do an incredible job each in their roles would be the biggest understatement I would say in these reviews. Just like Joel and Ellie again, I couldn't help but form an emotional attachment to the two and wanted them to survive. As we all know, this isn't what happened. Okay, let's talk about the ending. Sam asks Ellie if she is ever scared, a callback to earlier in the episode when Henry needs to act tough to comfort Sam. Ellie's initial reaction is to be playful and a bit childish, probably as a way to deflect the question, but eventually says her biggest fear is ending up alone. This fear being the main driving force of Ellie's actions for most of the season. Just like Henry was able to reach through Joel's barriers, Sam is able to do the same for Ellie. This is when a big deviation from the game version of the scene takes place and is painful to even think about. Sam tells Ellie he is infected. Sam is younger than Ellie in the show, and clearly looks up to her, enough to reveal this secret to her and seek her comfort. Ellie then, in a desperate attempt to save Sam's life, reveals the secret that she is immune to him, and tries what she can to protect him. She in this moment becomes a protector, something that Henry, when he was about to sacrifice his life, told her to be. Maybe if you were just watching this show, you might think this could work. If you played the game, however, you know this isn't how her immunity works, and that Sam is gone. Seeing Ellie try her best to save Sam and comfort him as long as she can makes this scene even more of a gut punch. And then we cut to the morning. Both Brandon Scott in the game and Lamar Johnson do an incredible job in this scene. Both performances broke my heart, and I dare not compare them. Both versions of the scene are fairly similar until the very end. The game's version that hard cuts to black right after Ellie says, "Oh my god," to this day still gives me chills. In the show version, however, Joel is the one to say this line. Hell, we don't even see Joel's reaction till later. What we do see, though, is Ellie's reaction. I've praised Bella's performance in this show to no end. Her reaction here, her gasp, her tears, it made me cry. Ellie tried to be a protector. She tried to save Sam, and failed. I don't think it's a coincidence that she is the one to walk off at the end of this episode, like Joel did after Tess's death in episode 2. All she does is leave one final message to Sam. I'm sorry. Joel's reaction to seeing this also shook me to my core. He just witnessed what he was fearful of the most. A protector not being able to save who they can save, and being left broken, whether that be through Henry or through Ellie, who he didn't expect would become one. He witnessed what happened to him with Sarah, and he doesn't want that pain to happen again, and he will try to stray from that path in the next episode. But for now, this is where episode 5 ends. Again, I want to reiterate that I love The Last of Us Part 1. This show wouldn't have been successful if the game didn't set the groundwork. It's moments like this, though, additions that make the story more impactful, that make me love this adaptation, and possibly prefer it over the original. Just like Joel, I did not want to experience this pain again, but I did, and in the end, it helped me to love this show even more. I keep on calling these people characters, and yes, that is true, but out of any work of fiction I've ever experienced, this might be the one that truly feels like a story about people, real humans. Humans that love and humans that hurt. Episode 5 encapsulates all of this perfectly, and I could not wish for anything better. I love The Last of Us. I love this story. I love these people, and we still have even more to cover. Joel has faced an emotional trial, and is faced with the choice of turning back. It is time for episode 6, Ken. Actually, before we get into the video, here's a quick note. I've tried uploading this video 3 times to YouTube, and for some reason, all the other episodes of The Last of Us are fine, but for some reason, this episode is the one that's always gets claimed. So, I've tried disputing it. I don't know if that's going to work out or not. But if you're listening to this, it didn't. So that's why there's going to be a weird filter on top of this section. Just warning you, I'm sorry for that. And that's why this video wasn't uploaded on Wednesday. That, and also because Vegas is being a jerk, and I hate Vegas so goddamn much. So if you have any other editing software you would recommend to me, please put it down in the comments. I would really appreciate that. I hate this software now. It keeps on crashing to me every time I render this video. If it crashes again when I render it this time, I'm gonna cry. Sorry for that. Let's get on to reviewing this episode.
It's really interesting that the show is actually building up the stuff I don't know about in part 2 with all the stuff I've been spoiled with. It's gonna be really interesting to see that stuff for the first time in the show. Oh yeah, that one character dying. Yeah, I'm really excited for that as well. That's gonna be amazing. The fuck did I just say?
I think now is a very good time to reiterate that I want these reviews to be watchable for people who have only seen the show. That's why I am not flat out saying what exactly some moments in the show are building up to, and why I am exclusively using trailer footage for part 2 and not actual cutscene footage. I myself haven't even played part 2 or seen a playthrough. I do know the general plot outline, the beginning, the end, and some other plot beats. I don't know most of the characters or most of the plot, and I would like to keep it that way until I play the game for myself, either when part 2 releases on PC or when the rumored director's cut releases. If you are just watching the show or have not played part 2, I would advise you to be safe going down to the comments. If you do want to reply with spoilers, please put a warning at the start of your comment, whether it be spoilers for part 1 or part 2. And again, I will not be showing or discussing spoilers for part 2 in these videos, unless stuff from that game is explicitly shown in this season, or until season 2 itself arrives. With that being said, I'm going to break my rule here for just 1 second. It's not going to be a massive spoiler, but listen, I just gotta mention this, alright? And if I don't, I'm going to be kicking myself afterwards. I won't go into the plot of part 2. This is going to be a vague spoiler. If you wish to skip it, jump to this time code. I'll give you 5 seconds to do so. Okay, thumbs up. And if you played part 2, or even know just the basic knowledge of the game, you know what I'm talking about. It was confirmed in the podcast, which again, you should listen to, that the girl who was eyeing Ellie when she was eating was in fact Dina from part 2.
And there's like a nice kind of, what you call it, an Easter egg? I don't know if I would call it an Easter egg.
It's a little, I mean, it's ambiguous. Somebody's staring at Ellie.
Yeah, which is
I wonder who that could be, theoretically or not. We'll find out maybe one day.
I completely missed that. Yeah. What are you looking at?
Yeah.
More lesbian foreshadowing! Let's fucking go! But here's the part that is a bit more spoilery. I've had this suspicion for a while that the show would be doing this, but I didn't want to say it explicitly, both for the sake of spoilers, and the fact that I don't want to look like a fool when I am wrong. After this little cameo, though, yeah, I'm 90% sure we're gonna see Abby in episode 9. If I'm wrong, I don't know, post a video of me reading that embarrassing Reagan simp Twitter thread I posted a while ago. Please don't look that up. Anyway, returning to the spoiler-free zone in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Man, I can't believe the crossover between Last of Us and Uncharted was foreshadowed in this episode. Finally! Thank God! Okay, I'm kidding. Although there is a reference to it with Tess's lighter in episode 2. Anyway, let's get to the review of this episode, which is honestly my least favorite so far. Yeah, despite all the great foreshadowing and setup for part 2, including just all of Jackson City, instead of just the dam in part 1. There are some great additions and changes in this episode that I love though. So how about we go through this episode in order and talk about what I love and didn't love. And if my 15-minute review of episode 5 didn't make it clear enough, I still love this show, and I think it might be better than the game. Just not in some moments here. I also kinda want to make this quick since I initially wanted this review to be relatively short, and I wanted this video to come out shortly after this episode was released, and I am failing in both right now. So let's hurry this up a bit. First off, I love the flashback to Henry's death at the beginning of this episode. Well, okay, I didn't want to see it again, but I love how they reference the iconic cut to black from the original game here. I also love how we both get a 3 months time skip to both let Joel and Ellie bond off screen, but also to mourn the loss of Sam and Henry on their own, similar to the game. We also cut to a fairly humorous scene of Joel asking directions very politely at gunpoint. Nice way to refresh ourselves from the traumatic end of the last episode. One minor panic attack later, I'm sure that won't have any meaning later. We cut to Ellie and Joel camping at night, a great moment showing us that the two have definitely started to bond in the last 2 episodes and during the time skip. I love how Joel is able to predict who Ellie's favorite astronaut is. Whether he likes to or not, he is starting to get to know her well enough that she is comfortable enough to ask him about her worries if her immunity will truly save lives. This moment and the conversation she has with Joel when they ride into the university both show that Ellie does want to be a hero. However, she's scared it won't work, and that all this was for nothing. This also reminds Joel again of a protector not being able to save who they can save. Combine this with him failing to be able to stay awake and watch over Ellie, and you should know by now what this is all setting up to. We also see Ellie ask Joel to teach her how to hunt, which he says he won't do. He will though, later in this episode after they have their emotional confrontation. And I love how we have set up for this moment here. Hopefully we will actually see Ellie hunt in the next episode, or the episode after. We also see Ellie about to ask how a dam makes electricity, but Joel says he doesn't know. Ellie then says,
You know, you could have just made something up. I would have believed you.
Which later in this episode, Joel does make up something about contractors and Ellie believes him. There's also one extra detail in that moment I'll get to in a bit. Right now, let's talk about Ellie and Joel getting ambushed. It's a great, tense scene, and I especially love the shot of the riders approaching over the hill. But there's obviously one highlight we need to talk about, the infection check. Ellie's look of fear towards Joel, the ringing in his ear, and his little flinch when the dog barks is all perfect. Ellie is obviously fine at the end, and seeing Bella smile here just warms my heart so much. Pedro also does an incredible job in this scene, with the added flinch especially. And honestly, I think it is about time I pour out my love for his performance, especially since he completely stole the show in this episode. Pedro is finally able to open up more as Joel in this episode, and it all has to do with family again. Ellie finally becomes part of his family, and he meets with his blood family, Tommy. I love how you can see the tears in his eyes as he comforts Tommy. I also love how Ellie looks a little jealous at the two of them being so close. The scene of them eating their first proper meal in a while, or at all, is great, and I absolutely love how Joel apologizes for Ellie swearing, and Pedro playing up that good old Texan mannerisms very well here. I also really love the bickering of Ellie and Maria. Reminds me a bit of what Ellie and Bill had in the game, although definitely not as violent. Hopefully for the people that missed that in episode 3, this could be a nice little reminder of that. Jesus Christ, I really can't stop praising Bella as Ellie. Damn, I wonder why that is. Let's counterbalance this with praising both Pedro again and Rutina Wesley as Maria. They both do an incredible job in this scene, and I love how Pedro really is just focused on Tommy and wanting to connect with family, but Rutina is family now, and clearly judges Joel for his past actions. That line about bad reputation made me burst out laughing, as well as Joel's little half-assed congrats after learning they got married. We get a nice tour of Jackson. Tommy has an internal panic about being a communist, which is probably my favorite joke in this entire show so far. We see Shimmer, who is a horse in part 2 apparently. Again, I haven't played part 2, so I don't know. All I care about is Ellie being so cute again. God damn it, why do I keep on praising Bella so much? Although, while we are talking about her, I do want to touch a bit on her scene with Maria before we hit Joel's scenes, since I want to talk about those in unison. Ellie's talk with Maria is one that happens in the game, however, it is off screen. Obviously, with the benefit of not being limited towards one perspective, we are able to actually see this moment and see how Ellie learns about Sarah. She also stands up for Joel here a bit, which is very nice. Absolutely love how we learn here that Maria had a child herself that she lost 2 days after Joel did too. And, well, actually, let Rutina explain it. She does it perfectly.
Anybody who's like grieving or who've lost a child, everybody goes through that path differently. With Maria, I think she poured into the people because that's what she had. And I think Joel kind of just imploded. Like, I just feel like he just went into himself.
Having that parallel to Joel is really nice. It makes them getting off on the wrong foot this episode even more understandable. Now let's finally talk about Joel's scenes in Jackson. Firstly, let's talk about my least favorite part of this, and the part where I really wish the show didn't stray away from the game. There are two scenes where Joel remembers Sarah, and I'm sorry if this sounds rude, but I found both scenes to be, well, cliche. Him thinking he sees Sarah in the crowd, and him getting a Christmas flashback after his confrontation with Ellie, I both find to be honestly kind of cheap and not very effective. I think there was a better way to handle these moments and bring back an item from the game that could have worked really well here. The photo of Joel and Sarah. In the game, Tommy tries to give this to Joel and he refuses, but much later in the game, Ellie then tries to give the picture to Joel, and he accepts, showing that he has finally stopped mourning her loss and is ready to move forward. I am shocked the show didn't incorporate these moments, especially since there is a picture of Sarah and Joel we saw in the first episode that could have worked here. I would have had Tommy try to give Joel the picture either at the beginning or end of their bar scene. Then after his argument with Ellie, the picture is on the table next to the bed. He reflects on it a bit, then turns off the light, finally admitting that Ellie is now his daughter. Who knows? Maybe they tried doing this and it didn't work out, but I think this would have been much stronger than what we have currently in the show. With that being said, while I disagree with how these moments are written, how Pedro performs these scenes is absolutely incredible. The argument he gets into with Tommy about their past is incredibly well acted, and it adapts the scene from the game incredibly well. That scene, however, is nothing compared to the resolution of this conflict in the tool shed. We are finally able to see Joel be open about how he feels, something he is only able to do here to his brother. We actually see Joel cry here, something that doesn't happen in the game version of this scene, and makes this moment even more impactful. Although the resolution to their conflict in the game is Tommy seeing Joel being a father for Ellie, and I think that is a great moment as well. I love seeing how subtle and quiet Pedro has acted throughout this series, and it makes this moment of him finally opening up hit even harder. We don't want him to leave Ellie, but we understand why he wants to. Not because he hates her and doesn't want to love her, but because he does love her and doesn't want to feel the pain of loss again. I have no notes on this scene. This show broke my heart again, but what else is new? And then we finally get to the most popular scene in all of The Last of Us. My go-to scene for footage from this game. Ellie and Joel's argument, while the room itself is almost identical to the game, as well as the blocking, even including the iconic push. This scene is tweaked a bit in both the direction and the writing, both working better for this medium, although I am sad we lost the line.
You are treading on some mighty thin ice here.
Although, ending the scene with
Now come dawn, we're going our separate ways,
was honestly a pretty badass way to end the scene. This scene is absolutely incredible and a highlight of the episode and the show in general. There's a reason why I keep on referring to it. This is the moment Ellie lays out all of her fears to Joel. Ellie is fully open to Joel in a desperate attempt to stay with him after losing so many people in her life. And Joel must finally be hit with the realization that Ellie is his daughter and she needs him. She doesn't need any protector like at the start of the show. She needs Joel. The one person who understands her, the one she has bonded with the most, the one that she knows will protect her and never let her down again. But as we will soon see, that thought might turn out to be false. Before we get to that moment though, let's quickly go through some other scenes that happen in between. I love Joel giving Ellie a quote-unquote choice on who she wants to ride with, when the answer is painfully obvious, and she has no hesitation going with Joel. I love how Tommy tells Joel Jackson can't be his home once he comes back. Then we get a full montage of Joel and Ellie finally becoming father and daughter, like with Joel teaching Ellie how to fire a rifle and the jokes the two make together. The one little moment here that broke my heart was when Ellie lays her head on Joel. All of these scenes combined with the incredible song and music placement. Seriously, this might be my favorite song in all of The Last of Us. All round up to an incredible moment and one final calm before the storm. That storm being the university. The two enter, thinking their journey is finally going to come to an end and that they will be able to live in peace, but then quickly realize it ain't over yet. Well, at least for one of them. Joel's injury signals the end of the second act, and his entrance into the abyss of the hero's journey. I love that the show changes what his injury actually is. making it less over the top and more realistic. And Bella begging Joel to get up at the end almost brought me to tears. What a cliffhanger. And I think now is the perfect time to explain why I've been so focused on Ellie in all these reviews. I started this video talking about Joel and his hero's journey, so I think it's only fair I talk about Ellie at the end. You could argue that Ellie is the main character of The Last of Us Part 1, and I will argue that she is the main character of this franchise as a whole. While yes, The Last of Us Part 1 is about Joel's hero's journey, it's also about Ellie's coming of age story. And now in the story, we finally get to see why that is. In fact, you can argue that's the more important story of Part 1 over Joel's hero's journey. Put into perspective, Naughty Dog, when they were marketing this game originally, didn't show any gameplay of Ellie. In fact, they flat out lied and said Ellie would not be playable in the game. But she is. And this is the part where we do so. I know I'm kinda slightly revealing what the next episode, and possibly the episode after that, is gonna be about, but I just can't wait to talk about this. I've talked in this review how these characters feel more like people than characters. I feel like Ellie is the center of that. She's the emotional core of The Last of Us, and I am so excited to get to Left Behind. You have no idea. So, I'll see y'all on Act 3, and please enjoy me being up at, it's now 4:13 a.m., and trying to say perspective for like a couple minutes. To put into perspective. Why can't I say perspective? Perspective. To put into perspective. Holy shit. To put into perspective. It is fucking 4 a.m. I can't do this shit. To put into what the fuck? Okay. To put into stop. To put into perspective.